Today I would like to introduce Simone Harding. Simone is a naturopath, kinesiologist and intuitive healer. Simone is one of Australia's leading lecturers in kinesiology, past owner and founder of one of Australia's first large natural medicine clinics. Simone now sees clients in both Sydney and Melbourne and is currently completing her Masters in acupuncture. We're going to talk to Simone today about the different factors that influence one's health. Welcome to Simply Wellbeing, Simone.
Thank you.
There's a lot there. You're very busy.
I am very busy. Lots of areas to cover.
You do. You have a lot of experience. So there are so many different perspectives on what is important for a person to be healthy, and even some of these contradict other schools of thought. So why do you think this happens?
I think people are looking for a solution that we can actually apply to everybody. But the problem with that is that there's so many different factors that affect a person's health. There's their age, where they live, their social, economic background, their beliefs. So all those things will actually influence a person's health.
That's right. And I suppose a lot of people think being healthy is just about diet and exercise when there's actually so much more to it, isn't there?
Well, that's what's fascinating. You know, after I did 30,000 hours of clinical experience, my background was in naturopathy, which is looking at those things, diet and lifestyle changes. But what I found was there was a certain percentage of people that did all of those things and still didn't actually have the health changes that they thought that they would have, or more importantly, that I thought they should actually be able to achieve.
And is that when you start looking at what's going on emotionally or mentally, or what lifestyle, like you said, what they're doing in their life that might be affecting it, that isn't about herbs and diet?
Well, that's right. I was actually quite fascinated with this, and in the end, that's perhaps where I discovered my main interest was looking at blocks and discovering that a lot of blocks related to a person's emotional health, and then connecting their emotional health with their physical health.
So it's not a one size fits all when it comes to anything in health, is it?
Well, I think that's the problem is that when we look at the word holistic, it means the whole person, and people are very complicated. And so it's very difficult to actually have one rule for one person because there's lots of aspects of that person.
And I mean, you're an intuitive healer as well. What exactly is that?
So, I mean, intuitive healers can have lots of different skills and abilities. My main one is that I actually am kinesthetic. I get to feel what it's like to be in that person's body. So,
wow.
Yeah, it can be a very interesting day at the office. So I'm actually able to detect where the pain's felt or symptoms or feelings. And in that, I also get other information, like auditory information. So I get told words or bits of information that relate to that person to help them to be able to make sense of what's going on for them physically and emotionally.
And is that something that do you use that to help diagnose people, or what do you use this for?
It can be part of a diagnosis, so it can be helping that person to actually get a sense of what's going on. So you can have medical intuitives that can make sense of missing pieces or something that doesn't fit within pathology. Often they've had medical tests and things like that and they haven't quite found what's going on, so you could use a medical intuitive in that situation. But I also use it to create confirmation, so that person will come in and I'll say, I think this is going on as well, and we'll get some clarity. And with that, then looking at what's the cause. Because it's one thing to diagnose, but for me, there's no point diagnosing unless you get a sense of, what's going to help that person to actually make the shifts and the changes necessary.
So when you see people, obviously, you're a naturopath, you're a kinesiologist, and you're an intuitive healer. How do you decide, when someone comes in, what you do and what's more important to you as well? You're obviously studying acupuncture as well. Because obviously you've got experience in so many different facets of natural medicine. What tools do you use when you're seeing a client?
Well, that's the lovely thing when you've got lots of tools. You just have to work out what tool you need for the job. And so after a lot of experience, that person that comes in, you get a sense of what's necessary for them. And what's necessary for them isn't necessarily always what I'd like to use. It's about what that person's capable of using, ready to use, comfortable using. So some people want plainly, simply just a quick diet, and other people are really open to exploring deep emotional blocks.
Which can be really important, where you are emotionally has such a huge effect on your health, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I've discovered, that pretty much emotional blocks really determine a person's health and well-being. And a lot of the work that I've done is looking at trauma and how trauma shuts off parts of the brain. It literally shuts off parts of the brain and neural pathways. And in that, it has all these other effects on the body, which is actually really interesting. But and then breaking it down to pain. You know, I see people in lots of pain, and pain can be one of those things that draws attention to the body, saying that this muscle's not okay. But I often find that pain essentially is about emotional pain that's been trauma stuck in that part of the body. So my job is to go in there and look at that and discover what that trauma is and release that trauma.
I find it so fascinating. So how important is emotional health to your health?
Well, I actually now, after 20 years of being in this industry, and as I said, 30,000 hours of clinical experience, find that it's essential. I think that why we have ill health, it's the body telling us that something in our body's not working well, and most of the time I think that's because we're not aligned to where we need to be or what we're needing to be doing. And so by understanding that and by working with the emotions, because all emotion are is information, we can actually help that person not just to be well, but to align themselves to where they're meant to be in their life and their purpose, which is what I'm really passionate about.
I find this aspect of health so interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, we have a conscious mind and there's a subconscious, and our conscious mind is what we in our brain are always thinking about, and then the unconscious is what's beneath, and a lot of the time it's in our body, it's that the gut feeling telling us to do something, and it seems to me that what you do is helping people unlock that.
Well, I see the subconscious as the body, and I find that the body holds the memories of the child, and I find the child holds the subconscious. So what I do in the work that I do is I place people into REM. It's not hypnosis, it's rapid eye movement. And in that space, they actually start to communicate to their subconscious, talk to that part of themselves that has all this information, and then they start to create a communication and work together. And with that, when you have alignment of your conscious self and your subconscious self, you have a lot more potential to move forward in a kind of collaborative sense, which is really kind of powerful.
So it creates that kind of awareness.
Yeah, it creates awareness. And this is the work that people would call is consciousness and enlightenment work.
And how does this relate to spiritual health?
Well, I guess consciousness and enlightenment is about spiritual health. And you could talk about spiritual health in lots of different ways, but the way that I see it, it's aligning oneself to their purpose and being able to come in contact with what is it that's important for that person on a very deep level. And although we might have religion that helps us to form beliefs around that, when you take a person into this space, often they can discover that for themselves, which is a wonderful thing, what's really true to them.
And you're bringing up before emotional blocks that you help people deal with this. So what are emotional blocks?
So often when a person's had a trauma, they'll disassociate, they'll disconnect from that experience if it happens, especially when they're very young and it's very severe. And why they do that, it's quite functional, because if they're aware of the situation, especially as a child, they wouldn't be able to cope or handle that situation because they couldn't change it. So it's very overwhelming to be in a situation and realise you can't change it. So in a sense, you disassociate from that feeling. And what happens is that there's a whole lot of belief systems and programming that goes into that. So a person will get into a habit in certain situations that they'll actually continually disassociate because they believe that situation is painful. And so what happens is that they're not actually being conscious about what's making their choices, and they're making choices out of even avoiding something.
And they don't even realise they're still doing it.
Don't even realise they're doing it. It's like walking down the street and doing up your shoelaces. Often, first of all, you don't even realise they're undone. Second of all, you don't even realise that you've done them up. And third of all, you don't even realise how you do them up. You've even forgotten how you do them up. You've done it so many times.
So is it always just the early childhood experiences that affect us, or is it things that can happen today?
Often you'll find that there'll be experiences that you'll have as an adult. But what's really fascinating, and this is part of the patterning that I've discovered, is that often there's trauma will be there in your DNA. Often the experiences that you've had, your family members often had, and you'll mirror those.
Wow.
Yeah, and often it'll actually be in your birth story and then the first couple of years of life. And then those patterns will repeat themselves over and over again. And you'll actually then be able to gain consciousness, and there'll be very similar kind of patterns or stories.
Wow, and it makes sense when there's, certain diseases run in families and things like that.
That's right.
This can all affect you, can't it?
That's right.
Well, I'm so interested in everything you've been talking about, and we're actually running out of time. But if people wanting to know more about you, or where they can find you, or any of your consultations, where can they find you? It's
probably best to go to my website, simoneharding.com. That contains all the information. and I'd love to hear from people. Also, at the moment, there's beautiful things in astrology going on at the moment, so you might want to follow me on Facebook as well at A Spirited Practice.